The gentle morning light filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the compact, organized apartment of Maya Wilson in downtown Phoenix. The alarm clock rang, breaking the silence at 5:45 a.m. Maya stretched as she rose from bed in her usual routine, her eyes still clouded with sleep but her determination evident. Today, she didn't face a major court case as usual, just a minor parking ticket to resolve. Even so, Maya didn't allow herself to slack off. She had learned that no matter the situation, preparation was always the key to success. Stepping into the bathroom, she looked in the mirror, seeing the resolute face that bore the marks of years of tireless advocacy. At 38, Maya had become one of Phoenix's most respected civil rights attorneys. But today, she reminded herself, was a day to deal with something personal, a rare event in her busy schedule. Maya's apartment reflected her personality: orderly, efficient, with a workspace always ready. Neatly stacked case files sat on her desk. Her professional attire, a sleek gray dress, a crisp white blouse, and black high heels hung carefully near the door, as if waiting for an important meeting. But today, Maya opted for a more casual look: black jeans, a light blue button-down shirt, and a lightweight blazer. She felt more at ease without the formality of her usual wardrobe. Sipping coffee prepared the night before, Maya reviewed the details of her parking violation. She wasn't one to dwell on trivial matters, but this time was different. The ticket had been issued in a zone with conflicting parking signs. Maya had taken photos as evidence and believed she had a strong case to dispute it. At 6:30 a.m., the wall clock chimed. Maya packed her things into her bag and stepped out of her apartment. The fresh morning air of Phoenix invigorated her, but her mind quickly shifted back to her day's agenda. She climbed into her trusty silver SUV, a vehicle that had accompanied her to countless courtrooms. While not as flashy as the luxury cars seen around downtown, it was a reliable companion. Maya merged into the bustling city traffic. Flashing stoplights, hurried pedestrians, and honking cars created the city's morning rhythm. She turned on the radio to catch the news. Last night, a group of civil rights lawyers filed a motion addressing discriminatory policies in Phoenix's court system. The familiar voice from the radio made her nod unconsciously. This was part of the fight she had dedicated her career to. At 7:45 a.m., as Maya prepared to exit the freeway toward a parking lot near the courthouse, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Peter, U.S. Attorney's Office. Peter was her boss, known for his meticulous nature and unrelenting expectations. Maya, sorry to call this early. Peter's voice came through the line. We've got an urgent situation with the Brown vs. Wells class action. The opposing counsel just submitted new documents we need to respond to before noon. Maya pulled over to the shoulder, her brow furrowing. The Brown case was one of the biggest she'd ever worked on, involving hundreds of workers exploited in labor schemes. Do I have any time, Peter? She asked, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Not much, Peter replied. I'll email you the documents. I need you to review and get back to me as soon as possible. Maya exhaled, her mind already planning. She needed to find a place to stop, open her laptop, and start working immediately. Got it. I'll start reviewing right now, she said, her voice steady yet firm. Maya pulled into a small coffee shop along the way, a spot she often frequented when she needed to focus. While sipping her second cup of coffee, she opened her laptop, connected to her mobile hotspot, and began reviewing the documents. The opposing counsel's arguments were complex, requiring careful analysis. Maya diligently noted every point she needed to counter. When she finally looked at the clock, her heart sank. It was already 8:50 a.m. She needed to leave immediately to make it to the courthouse on time. Gathering her belongings, she sent Peter a brief summary email and headed back to her car. On the way, she reassured herself that a small delay wouldn't ruin her day. But she couldn't have known that this seemingly simple event would mark the beginning of a series of events that would change her life and the legal system around her forever. Maya sped through the crowded streets on her way to the county courthouse. The car clock read 9:05 a.m. When she pulled into the parking lot slightly earlier than she had anticipated, but still later than the 9 a.m. appointment that Judge Briggs had demanded, her face showed a flicker of worry as she grabbed her files from the back seat, her low heels clicking briskly against the concrete pavement. It's just a parking ticket, she told herself, trying to push away the growing unease. Everything will be fine. She entered the county courthouse, a cold concrete building with gray walls and dim fluorescent lighting. A long line of people waited outside the courtrooms, many with anxious expressions, clutching their paperwork as if it were a lifeline. Maya weaved through the crowd, making her way to Judge Walter Briggs's courtroom, well known for his strict demeanor and unyielding principles. The courtroom doors swung open as Maya stepped inside, trying not to draw attention, but the quiet room was quickly disrupted by Judge Briggs's sharp voice. "Ms. Maya Wilson, your appointment was at 9 a.m. He emphasized the time as though it were a formal accusation, his piercing eyes staring down from the elevated bench. All eyes in the room turned toward Maya. Some looked sympathetic, but most were curious or subtly mocking. Clutching her stack of documents tightly, Maya kept her voice calm as she replied, "Your Honor, I apologize for the delay. I was addressing an urgent matter related to my work." Judge Briggs, a man in his 60s with silver hair and steel-rimmed glasses, showed no trace of understanding. "I don't care about your excuses, Ms. Wilson. This delay is a sign of disrespect toward this court and the entire legal system." Maya stood tall, meeting Briggs's gaze. "Your Honor, I was delayed by an important matter, and I regret any inconvenience this caused. I am fully prepared to present my case." Briggs banged his gavel, the sharp sound echoing through the room. "This is not a negotiation. Punctuality is a prerequisite for maintaining the integrity of the law. I will note your tardiness and impose a penalty." Maya maintained her composure, though her mind churned. She observed as Briggs resumed handling other cases. While other latecomers, most of them neatly dressed white men, received little more than mild verbal reminders, the rebuke aimed at Maya was unusually personal and harsh. A middle-aged man stepped up to the stand, 5 minutes late. He was met with a simple nod and a brief reminder from Briggs, "Try to be on time next time." Maya mentally logged the incident, the disparity glaringly obvious. This wasn't the first time she had witnessed such behavior in the courtroom, but this time it was directed squarely at her. When Maya's case concluded, Briggs handed down the maximum penalty for the parking violation of $500 fine. "Let this serve as a lesson about punctuality," he declared, his tone icy. "You may pay the fine before leaving the courthouse." Maya exited the courtroom, her steps heavy but her mind racing. She knew this wasn't just a personal matter. Briggs's conduct wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a broader problem regarding how the system treated people who didn't fit its mold. In the hallway, she encountered Janet, a senior court clerk who had worked in the system for 2 decades. Janet approached her, her expression filled with empathy. "I've seen this happen too many times," Janet said, her voice soft but firm. "If you need any information, I'm here to help." Driving back to her office, Maya knew she couldn't let this go. Part of her wanted to brush it aside and focus on more significant cases, but a stronger part recognized that this was a moment to act. The injustice she had just experienced wasn't only about her, it affected countless others who lacked a voice in this system. Once home, Maya opened her laptop and began detailing everything that had occurred in the courtroom. Judge Briggs's tone, his demeanor, and how he treated other defendants. She wasn't going to let this incident fade away. Taking a sip of her coffee, her eyes gleamed with resolve. This was just the beginning. Maya sped through the crowded streets on her way to the county courthouse. The car clock read 9:05 a.m. When she pulled into the parking lot slightly earlier than she had anticipated, but still later than the 9 a.m. appointment that Judge Briggs had demanded. Her face showed a flicker of worry as she grabbed her files from the back seat, her low heels clicking briskly against the concrete pavement. "It's just a parking ticket," she told herself, trying to push away the growing unease. "Everything will be fine." She entered the county courthouse, a cold concrete building with gray walls and dim fluorescent lighting. A long line of people waited outside the courtrooms, many with anxious expressions, clutching their paperwork as if it were a lifeline. Maya weaved through the crowd, making her way to Judge Walter Briggs's courtroom, well known for his strict demeanor and unyielding principles. The courtroom doors swung open as Maya stepped inside, trying not to draw attention, but the quiet room was quickly disrupted by Judge Briggs's sharp voice. "Ms. Maya Wilson, your appointment was at 9 a.m. He emphasized the time as though it were a formal accusation, his piercing eyes staring down from the elevated bench. All eyes in the room turned toward Maya. Some looked sympathetic, but most were curious or subtly mocking. Clutching her stack of documents tightly, Maya kept her voice calm as she replied, "Your Honor, I apologize for the delay. I was addressing an urgent matter related to my work." Judge Briggs, a man in his 60s with silver hair and steel-rimmed glasses, showed no trace of understanding. I don't care about your excuses, Ms. Wilson. This delay is a sign of disrespect toward this court and the entire legal system. Maya stood tall, meeting Briggs's gaze. Your Honor, I was delayed by an important matter, and I regret any inconvenience this caused. I am fully prepared to present my case. Briggs banged his gavel, the sharp sound echoing through the room. This is not a negotiation. Punctuality is a prerequisite for maintaining the integrity of the law. I will note your tardiness and impose a penalty. Maya maintained her composure, though her mind churned. She observed as Briggs resumed handling other cases. While other latecomers, most of them neatly dressed white men, received little more than mild verbal reminders, the rebuke aimed at Maya was unusually personal and harsh. A middle-aged man stepped up to the stand 5 minutes late. He was met with a simple nod and a brief reminder from Briggs, try to be on time next time. Maya mentally logged the incident, the disparity glaringly obvious. This wasn't the first time she had witnessed such behavior in the courtroom, but this time it was directed squarely at her. When Maya's case concluded, Briggs handed down the maximum penalty for the parking violation of $500 fine. Let this serve as a lesson about punctuality, he declared, his tone icy. You may pay the fine before leaving the courthouse. Maya exited the courtroom, her steps heavy but her mind racing. She knew this wasn't just a personal matter. Briggs's conduct wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a broader problem regarding how the system treated people who didn't fit its mold. In the hallway, she encountered Janet, a senior court clerk who had worked in the system for 2 decades. Janet approached her, her expression filled with empathy. I've seen this happen too many times, Janet said, her voice soft but firm. If you need any information, I'm here to help. Driving back to her office, Maya knew she couldn't let this go. Part of her wanted to brush it aside and focus on more significant cases, but a stronger part recognized that this was a moment to act. The injustice she had just experienced wasn't only about her, it affected countless others who lacked a voice in this system. Once home, Maya opened her laptop and began detailing everything that had occurred in the courtroom. Judge Briggs's tone, his demeanor, and how he treated other defendants. She wasn't going to let this incident fade away. Taking a sip of her coffee, her eyes gleamed with resolve. This was just the beginning. Maya sat at her desk in her apartment, the warm glow of the desk lamp illuminating her face. The parking violation file sat next to her laptop, but her mind couldn't escape what had transpired at the courthouse that morning. The discrimination she had just experienced wasn't uncommon, but this time it was no longer a vague feeling, it was a stark reality witnessed by many. She opened a new document on her computer and began typing. Preliminary report on bias in Judge Walter Briggs's courtroom. Maya recalled every detail from the courtroom: Briggs's cold tone, the way he interrupted her, and the contrast with his gentler demeanor toward other defendants. She noted down every observation, including times, language used, and the judge's expressions. Numbers swirled in her head. How many times had people like her, women, minorities, or anyone who didn't fit the traditional image of professionalism, been treated unfairly? Maya didn't have the answer yet, but she knew that to act, she needed evidence. The next day, Maya returned to the county courthouse, but this time, not to argue a case. Armed with a tablet and notebook, she was determined to gather data. On her way inside, she spotted Janet, the clerk who had approached her the day before. Janet, Maya began, keeping her tone friendly but serious, you mentioned you've seen this happen before. Can you tell me more? Janet sighed, her gaze drifting into the distance. Maya, I've worked in this system for 20 years. Briggs isn't the only one, but he's definitely the most blatant. I've kept notes on some cases in my personal journal, but I never thought I'd actually use them. Those notes could be the key, Maya said, her eyes lighting up. I don't just want to file a personal complaint. I want to address the root of this problem. Janet nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her bag and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. You can look through this, but be careful. If anyone finds out I'm helping you, my career is over. That evening, Maya pored over Janet's notes. What she read astonished her. The cases detailed in the journal clearly showed that Judge Briggs disproportionately issued harsher penalties to defendants who were people of color, women, or from other minority backgrounds. Meanwhile, white defendants often received leniency or mild verbal warnings. Maya began compiling a spreadsheet on her computer, categorizing cases by time, type of violation, penalties, and demographics. Patterns started to emerge. 72% of defendants of color received the maximum penalties. 50% of white defendants were either let off with a warning or fined minimally. Women received penalties that were, on average, 30% higher than those given to men. Feeling the need for support, Maya reached out to Louise, a passionate young attorney who had interned under her guidance. After hearing Maya's account over the phone, Louise agreed to meet her at his small office. "Maya, I've always known the system has issues, but I never thought about what we could do to change it," Louise said, his eyes glowing with enthusiasm. "If you've got evidence, I'll help you bring this to the State Judicial Commission." The two got to work. Maya shared the data she had gathered, and Louise helped her draft an action plan. They decided to start by filing a public records request with the county courthouse to gather more evidence. A few days later, Maya and Louise submitted the public records request. While awaiting a response, Maya continued reaching out to colleagues and other attorneys who might have witnessed similar behavior from Briggs or other judges. Several attorneys, especially younger ones, expressed agreement and shared their own stories. One attorney admitted that he had looked the other way during his time at the county courthouse, fearing that speaking up would end his career. "I can't let this go on," Maya told Louise during a late-night meeting. "We're not just dealing with Briggs. We're taking on an entire system." Maya stood outside the public records office at the Phoenix County Courthouse, her heart filled with hope yet tinged with apprehension. Today, she and Louise were expecting an official response to the records request they had filed a week ago. These records were crucial to proving a pattern of bias in Judge Briggs's rulings. The office manager, a middle-aged woman named Charlotte, greeted Maya with an unwelcoming look. "I'm afraid we can't provide the full records you requested," Charlotte said stiffly. "Some of the documents pertaining to specific cases are protected by confidentiality regulations." "Could you explain further?" Louise asked, striving to keep his tone calm. "We're only requesting general data penalties, violation types, and basic demographics, not personal details." Charlotte shrugged, clearly unwilling to budge. "I'm just following procedure," she replied. "If you're dissatisfied, you can file a formal complaint." Maya sensed an underlying resistance. "Thank you, we'll follow the necessary steps," she responded, her tone polite but firm. As they left the office, she turned to Louise, determination flashing in her eyes. "If they won't cooperate, we'll find another way." That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected call from Janet. "Maya, I think you should meet me. I have something you need to see." They met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. Janet pulled an old stack of documents from her bag. "These are files I've kept over the years. I'm not sure how helpful they'll be, but I can't stay silent anymore." Maya flipped through the documents, overwhelmed by the meticulously recorded numbers and incidents. She realized this was the key to unlocking the door the system was trying so hard to keep shut. "Janet, this is a breakthrough," Maya said, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I promise to protect you." That evening, Maya and Louise pored over Janet's notes together. The data began to form a clear picture. 85% of defendants of color received the highest penalties for traffic violations. 70% of penalty reduction requests by women were denied, compared to 30% for men. Cases involving minorities were resolved 40% faster on average, indicating a lack of attention to detail. Louise stared at the screen, then turned to Maya. "Maya, this is undeniable evidence of discrimination. If we can pair this with official documents, we can take this to the next level." The next day, Maya received a letter from the courthouse stating that her records request had been officially denied. The reason given was that the request was too broad and did not comply with confidentiality regulations. Holding the letter, Maya's frustration boiled over. "They're deliberately obstructing us," she said to Louise. "We need a different strategy." Louise nodded. "Maybe it's time to take this public. If enough people know, they won't be able to cover it up." That evening, Maya crafted a detailed post on social media, sharing some of the data from Janet's notes along with her personal experiences in Judge Briggs's courtroom. The post quickly went viral, garnering hundreds of shares and comments within hours. "This isn't just my story," Maya wrote. "This is the story of everyone who has been treated unfairly simply for not fitting the system's stereotypes. It's time for change." The next morning, Maya woke to an influx of messages from lawyers, social activists, and even a few courthouse employees. Many shared that they had witnessed or experienced similar situations but had never dared to speak out. One message stood out from a local journalist named Rachel Kim. "I'd like to write a piece about what you're doing. This is a story people need to hear." Maya didn't hesitate to accept. If justice needs to shine light on darkness, then this is how we begin. As Maya's story hit the press, pressure mounted on the court system. Judge Briggs's office issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and personal. However, rather than quelling the public's outrage, the statement only fueled it further. Meanwhile, Janet warned Maya that Briggs was exerting pressure on staff to keep them silent. "You need to be careful," Janet said. "They won't hesitate to play dirty to protect themselves." Maya knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. With Luis, Janet, and a growing number of supporters by her side, Maya was ready to continue the fight. Maya stepped into the morning press conference, sunlight streaming through the large glass windows of the small conference center. Dozens of reporters were present, cameras, microphones, and curious eyes all pointed in her direction. Rachel Kim, the journalist who had helped bring Maya's story to light, stood beside her, giving her an encouraging nod. Maya took a deep breath, adjusting her stance. This was no longer about her, it was a fight for the thousands of people who had faced injustice in the judicial system. "Thank you all for coming today," Maya began, her strong voice resonating through the room. "Our legal system is built on the principle of equality. But the reality is, for many, particularly people of color, women, and other marginalized groups, justice has been distorted by systemic bias." Systemic bias. She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the attentive faces. "I've gathered data from hundreds of cases in Judge Walter Briggs's courtroom. The numbers don't lie. Discrimination has become an undeniable part of how he conducts his proceedings. But I'm not just talking about one individual. This is a systemic issue." Rachel nodded from the back of the room. Maya could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting. She continued, "Today, I am calling for a thorough and transparent investigation, not just into Judge Briggs but into the entire court management system in Phoenix County." Just hours after the press conference, Judge Briggs held a private meeting with a few of his trusted staff members. A formal statement from his office was released to the press, calling Maya's allegations baseless and defamatory. "I have served this court for 30 years, Briggs said in the statement. "Justice has always been my highest principle, and I have never allowed bias to influence my rulings." However, the statement only intensified the pressure. Individuals who had been affected by biased rulings began coming forward with their stories. A black woman shared how she had received the maximum penalty for a minor traffic violation, while a white man in a similar situation was let off with just a warning. Briggs wasn't idle. He reached out to several close attorneys and influential figures within the judicial system to try to undermine Maya's credibility. Rumors about Maya's personal motivations began circulating, attempting to paint her as someone seeking attention. Maya received a call from a friend working in the prosecutor's office. "They're trying to dig into your work," Maya, her friend, warned. "Be careful with every move you make." Luis suggested Maya partner with major civil rights organizations to build broader support. Maya agreed, and within days they had reached out to the American Civil Liberties Union (ACLU) and several local legal advocacy groups. These organizations not only provided legal support but also helped amplify the issue in the media. At a meeting with the ACLU, Maya presented her data. Analysts confirmed that the numbers were undeniable. A clear pattern of discrimination existed in Briggs's rulings. The ACLU pledged to support Maya in bringing the matter before the State Judicial Council. A chain reaction began to ripple through the judicial system. Several other judges, worried about a broader investigation, started distancing themselves from Briggs. Some even secretly contacted Maya, providing internal information about how rulings were handled in courtrooms. Briggs isn't the only one, a younger judge admitted during a clandestine meeting. "But he's the most egregious. If he falls, I think many others will have to change how they operate." A week later, Maya received a call from the State Judicial Council informing her that a formal investigation into Judge Briggs had been initiated. It was a significant step forward, but also fraught with danger. Briggs was not the type to back down easily. "This is the most dangerous time," Maya Louise cautioned. "Briggs will do everything he can to hold on to his power. We need to be meticulous and leave no room for mistakes." Maya gazed out the window of her office, the streetlights casting a glow on her determined face. The battle had entered a new phase with higher stakes and greater risks, but she knew she was no longer alone. The community was standing with her, and change was beginning to take root. "We're getting closer to justice," she said to Luis, her voice resolute. "And I won't stop now." Maya sat in front of her computer screen, the desk lamp casting light on her tired but resolute face. An email from the State Judicial Council had just arrived, announcing that an official investigation into Judge Briggs's conduct had been approved. It was an initial victory, but Maya knew it was only the beginning of a long battle. A few days later, Briggs held a private press conference to defend his reputation. He stood before the crowd in his impeccable judicial robe, his voice calm but laced with implication. "I have dedicated over 3 decades to ensuring justice in Phoenix," Briggs said, his eyes fixed on the cameras. "These allegations are unfounded and stem from personal motives. I trust that the truth will come to light." Maya watched the press conference from her screen, feeling the tension rising in her chest. Briggs was attempting to spin the narrative in his favor, but she knew the evidence she had gathered would speak for itself. As the investigation was announced, numerous lawyers and defendants who had encountered Briggs reached out to Maya to share their stories. Among them was Chloe Ramirez, a 22-year-old college student who had been handed a severe penalty by Briggs for a minor traffic violation. "He didn't let me explain," Chloe recounted during a meeting with Maya. "I couldn't even finish a sentence. He just said the law is the law, and I had to face the consequences." Stories like Chloe's painted an increasingly clear picture of the unfair patterns in Briggs's courtroom. The official investigation began with the Judicial Council summoning witnesses, including Maya, Janet, and several other attorneys. Janet, with her detailed notebook, became one of the most critical witnesses. "I've worked in this courtroom for 20 years," Janet testified. "During that time, I've seen Judge Briggs handle cases unfairly. People of color and women were routinely given harsher penalties than white defendants for the same offenses." Maya also presented the data she and Luis had collected, including detailed analyses of penalties, demographics, and case processing times. The Judicial Council listened intently, taking extensive notes. As the investigation progressed, Briggs began employing retaliatory tactics. Some of his supporters spread rumors that Maya was using the case to build her own name. Anonymous articles emerged, accusing her of slandering a respected figure in the judiciary. Luis, with his experience in media strategy, quickly devised a plan. He and Maya organized a series of community meetings to share the stories of people who had been unfairly treated by Briggs. These gatherings not only built public support but also emphasized that this wasn't a personal vendetta, it was a systemic issue. The Judicial Council announced that they would hold a public hearing, where both Briggs and Maya would have the opportunity to present their cases. It was a major opportunity for Maya to publicly reveal the evidence, but it also meant directly confronting Briggs. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Luis asked on the eve of the hearing. "Briggs won't hesitate to attack you on every front." "This isn't just about me," Maya replied. "If I don't stand up, who will?" On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with people, including reporters and civil rights organizations. Briggs entered with a cold demeanor, while Maya arrived in a crisp professional suit, carrying all her evidence. Maya presented the data and stories she had gathered, while Briggs attempted to argue that his rulings were always based on the law and free of bias. However, Janet and other witnesses weakened his defense with detailed and specific accounts of unfair treatment. When the hearing concluded, the tension in the room was palpable. The Judicial Council announced that they would need time to review all the evidence before making a final decision. Maya sat on a bench outside the courtroom, watching the crowd disperse after the hearing. Janet sat down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've done everything you could, Maya," Janet said. "Now we have to wait." Maya nodded, her gaze fixed on the vast Phoenix sky. She knew she had laid a solid foundation for change, but the fight was far from over. Maya sat in her small office, staring at her computer screen. The email from the State Judicial Council had arrived. The short yet weighty message flashed on her screen. "After reviewing the evidence and witness testimonies, the Judicial Council has decided to expand the investigation into Judge Walter Briggs and temporarily suspend him from his duties pending the outcome." Maya exhaled deeply, relief washing over her. This was a major turning point in the weeks-long battle. But she knew this was far from over. Briggs still wielded significant influence within the judicial system, and he wouldn't give up without a fight. The day after the suspension was announced, Briggs held a press conference from his home. He appeared weary but defiant, standing before a small group of loyal reporters. "I deny all allegations and am committed to clearing my name," Briggs said, his voice strong. "What is happening is a personal attack on my reputation, and I will not allow it to tarnish my 30-year career dedicated to justice." Briggs's statement caught the attention of certain media outlets, but public opinion increasingly leaned toward Maya as more stories of injustice continued to surface. As the Judicial Council dug deeper into the data from Briggs's courtroom, shocking truths began to emerge. Statistical reports revealed 78% of defendants of color received maximum penalties over the past 5 years, compared to just 32% of white defendants. Women faced penalties that were, on average, 40% higher than those imposed on men for similar violations. Requests for continuances from minority defendants were denied twice as often as those from non-minority defendants. These findings not only undermined Briggs's position but also highlighted systemic issues within the Phoenix court system. Under pressure from the public and civil rights organizations, Phoenix County courts began implementing preliminary reforms. Some judges, fearing scrutiny, adjusted how they handled cases. New policies were enacted requiring all judges to report detailed statistics on penalties and case processing times. Janet, Briggs's former clerk, was appointed as a special supervisor to oversee courtroom practices. "We must ensure that what happened in Briggs's courtroom is never repeated," Janet said during a press conference. In a surprising turn of events, Briggs agreed to an interview with a local television station. During the conversation, he acknowledged that unconscious biases might have influenced his rulings. "I don't believe I was wrong," Briggs said, his voice tinged with hesitation. "But if the data suggests otherwise, I am willing to learn and make changes." Maya watched the interview with mixed emotions. It was the first time Briggs had admitted the possibility of wrongdoing, but she knew that acknowledgement alone couldn't undo the harm his rulings had caused. While Briggs worked to salvage his reputation, Maya continued to grow her movement. She organized a community gathering where victims of judicial injustice could share their stories. An elderly woman took the microphone, her hands trembling. "I was fined $1,000 by Briggs for a minor infraction, simply because I couldn't articulate myself clearly. I didn't know anyone was fighting for us. Thank you, Maya." Maya was moved, realizing that her work wasn't just about holding Briggs accountable, it was about creating a platform for the oppressed to have their voices heard. As the investigation progressed, public pressure intensified. Civil rights groups staged protests outside the county courthouse, demanding Briggs's resignation and calling for broader reforms in the judicial system. "A judge like Briggs has no place in our legal system," a civil rights activist said during a televised interview. "But we can't stop here. This is our opportunity to overhaul the entire system." 3 months after the investigation began, the Judicial Council released its final findings. The 150-page report concluded that Briggs had violated numerous judicial ethics principles and had demonstrated consistent bias in his rulings over the years. The council declared Briggs unfit to serve as a judge and demanded his immediate resignation. If he refused, he would face a public hearing to have his law license revoked. Maya received the news in her office. She couldn't suppress a small smile. This was a victory not just for her, but for everyone harmed by the systemic injustice. "A door has opened," she said to Louise, who was sitting beside her. "But our work isn't done. This is just the beginning." She looked out the window, where Phoenix's bright sunlight streamed in, carrying the promise of a more equitable future. 3 days after the Judicial Council's ruling, Maya walked into her office with a heavy heart. While Briggs had been suspended and was likely to resign, she understood that real change couldn't stop with one individual. The system that had enabled such injustices needed to be addressed, and she was determined to use this victory as a foundation for broader reform. News of Briggs's suspension dominated the media. Headlines like "Justice Misused, Judge Briggs Suspended" graced front pages, and civil rights organizations leveraged the story to push for more comprehensive changes in Phoenix's judicial system. Maya received dozens of messages daily from victims of similar injustices, not just from Phoenix but from other cities as well. A young mother from Tucson shared how she had been denied custody of her child because she couldn't answer a judge's questions properly. An elderly man from Flagstaff recounted being given the maximum fine for a minor traffic violation. These stories made it clear to Maya that the issue extended far beyond one judge or one city. One morning, Maya received a call from the State Judicial Council. On the line was Linda Moreno, head of the investigative committee. "Maya, I want to thank you for bringing these truths to light," Linda said. But we need your help with something else. We'd like you to lead a monitoring team to review all courtrooms across the state and identify patterns of injustice similar to those in Briggs's courtroom. Maya was taken aback, but immediately recognized the importance of the opportunity. I'll do it, she said, but I'll need full access to records and support from a team of experts. You'll have everything you need, Linda assured her. We believe you can lead this change. While Briggs was suspended, other judges in the system began to feel uneasy. Some tried to exert pressure on Maya through political connections or the media. She's turning the system into her personal stage, an anonymous senior judge was quoted in a news article. Justice cannot be distorted by fleeting emotions and outrage. These criticisms didn't deter Maya. Instead, she focused on building her team, inviting lawyers, social activists, and victims of the system to join her efforts. Over the next few months, Maya's team began analyzing thousands of case files from various courtrooms. Clear patterns of bias began to emerge. 75% of defendants of color in other courtrooms received harsher penalties than white defendants for similar offenses. Requests for penalty reductions or payment plans from minority defendants were denied 60% more often than those from non-minority defendants. Average case processing times for defendants of color were 40% shorter, indicating less attention to detail in their cases. This data was compiled into a 200-page report, which Maya presented to the State Judicial Council. Based on Maya's findings, the council implemented a series of sweeping reforms. Mandatory unconscious bias training. All judges and court staff were required to attend regular sessions to identify and mitigate biases in their decisions. Independent oversight system. An independent committee was established to monitor all courtrooms, ensuring transparency and fairness. Public statistical system. All rulings and penalties were to be documented and made publicly available for community oversight. At a legal conference, Maya unexpectedly ran into Briggs. He had resigned but still carried an air of arrogance. This time, however, instead of arguing, Briggs approached her and said, "You've won. I just hope you don't forget that this system still needs people like us." Maya looked him straight in the eye. "The system needs justice, sir, not arrogance." Returning to her office after a long day, Maya glanced at the framed $500 parking ticket receipt hanging on her wall, a symbol of how it had all begun. This time, she felt not just personal victory but a sense of hope for a better future. As she opened her laptop to prepare for a presentation at a law school, her phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "Thank you for showing us that change is possible. Keep fighting." Maya smiled, knowing she had laid the groundwork for transformation, not just in Phoenix's judicial system but far beyond. The inaugural meeting of the Judicial Oversight and Equality Commission was underway. Maya stood at the podium, facing dozens of representatives from legal agencies, civil rights organizations, and the community. This was the first day of the commission, established through the reforms she and her team had tirelessly fought to achieve. "This isn't just about one judge," Maya began, her strong voice resonating through the room. "It's about an entire system that has forgotten its original promise to ensure justice for everyone, regardless of race, gender, or social standing." Applause broke out as Maya outlined the commission's action plan. The initial steps included a comprehensive audit of Phoenix's judicial system within 6 months, recurring unconscious bias training sessions, and the establishment of an independent monitoring center. Although the reforms had begun, Maya knew real change wouldn't happen overnight. She spent much of her time at the Phoenix County Courthouse, overseeing the implementation of new regulations. Janet, now a senior supervisor for the program, reported that some judges initially resisted but gradually started cooperating. "I think they realize all eyes are on them now," Janet said during a meeting. "No one wants to become the next Briggs." News of the reforms in Phoenix spread beyond the city. Other cities, such as Tucson and Flagstaff, began referencing and adopting similar models. Even officials from other states reached out to Maya to learn from her efforts. One day, Maya received a call from Sharon Martinez, a prominent civil rights attorney in California. "I've read about what you've done in Phoenix," Sharon said. "We're trying to implement something similar in Los Angeles. We'd like you to come and share how you made it happen." Not everyone was pleased with the changes. A group of veteran judges in Phoenix publicly criticized Maya, claiming the new regulations were impractical and caused unnecessary disruption in the judicial system. "Justice cannot be managed with spreadsheets and charts," one judge declared at a press conference. "We need to trust judges' judgment rather than scrutinizing their every decision." Maya stood firm. In a public address, she responded, "Oversight is not a lack of trust. It's a way to ensure justice isn't distorted by bias or carelessness." One morning, Maya received an email from an elderly man named Harold Johnson, who had been unfairly treated in Briggs's courtroom. "Thank you for standing up and fighting," he wrote. "I've received a refund for a penalty I never thought I'd see repaid. You've shown us that real justice is possible." Messages like Harold's continued to pour in, affirming that the reforms were beginning to make a difference in people's lives. 3 months into the reforms, a major conference was held in Phoenix, drawing judges, lawyers, and social activists from across the state. Maya was invited as the keynote speaker. As she stepped up to the podium, she saw Janet, Luis, and dozens of other colleagues in the audience, those who had stood with her throughout this journey. "We are building a better system," Maya said, her voice filled with emotion. "But justice isn't a destination, it's a journey, and we must keep moving forward." That evening, Maya returned home and sat at her desk, her eyes drifting to the framed $500 parking ticket on the wall. It wasn't just a memory, but a symbol of where it all began. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sharon Martinez. "Phoenix has inspired us. We'll fight the way you did." Maya smiled, sensing the ripple effect of what she had started. A soft breeze drifted through the window, carrying with it the hope of a future where justice was no longer a privilege but a right for everyone. 3 months after the judicial reforms began, Phoenix had transformed. The new measures didn't just change how courtrooms operated, they created a culture of accountability and transparency throughout the judicial system. But Maya knew maintaining these changes required embedding them as part of a larger movement, not just a singular event. One morning, as Maya worked in her office, an email from the National Association of Judges landed in her inbox. The message invited her to speak at a national conference on judicial reform, asking her to present Phoenix's journey as a model for change. This wasn't just an invitation, it was recognition that her efforts had resonated far beyond the city limits. "You have to go," Maya Luis said when she told him about the invitation. "Your story isn't just Phoenix's anymore. It's an inspiration for the entire country." At the conference, Maya stepped onto the stage in front of hundreds of judges, attorneys, and social activists from across the nation. Bright lights illuminated her face, but she didn't feel the pressure. Instead, she drew strength from the people who had stood by her throughout the journey. "Justice cannot prevail if it is not fair," she began, her voice echoing across the auditorium. "We've seen that while our system is built on noble ideals, it can still be warped by bias and power." Maya recounted her story, from the $500 parking ticket to the investigation that sparked widespread reform. When she concluded her speech, the entire room rose in applause. Some audience members even had tears in their eyes. When Maya returned to Phoenix, she saw that the changes extended beyond the judicial system. Law schools had begun incorporating courses on bias and judicial equity into their curricula. Nonprofit organizations partnered with local governments to ensure marginalized groups could access legal resources more easily. Janet, now the head of the court oversight program, reported significant improvements. Average penalties for minority groups had decreased substantially, and the disparities in case outcomes across demographic groups had nearly disappeared. "You've done something incredible," Janet said during a meeting. "You've shown that one person can make a tremendous difference." One afternoon, Maya received a handwritten letter from Walter Briggs. The shaky but sincere handwriting read, "Maya, I've spent many nights reflecting on what happened. I realize now that I was wrong, not just in how I ran my courtroom, but in how I viewed justice itself. Thank you for showing me that there's always an opportunity to do better. I hope I can contribute to this change, even if only in a small way." Maya read the letter with mixed emotions, but she knew it marked a victory not just for her but for those who had suffered under Briggs's judgments. A year later, Phoenix celebrated the inauguration of the Judicial Education and Equity Center, a facility dedicated to training judges, attorneys, and court staff on bias, fairness, and transparency in the justice system. Maya was honored at the event for her monumental contributions. During the ceremony, Maya addressed the audience. "Justice is not just about what's written in the law. It's about how we treat one another, how we ensure that everyone has the chance to be heard. This is the beginning, not the end." Hundreds of attendees rose to their feet in applause, including victims of past injustices, Maya's steadfast allies like Luis and Janet, and even some judges who had once opposed her. That evening, Maya returned to her small apartment. She gazed at the framed $500 parking ticket on the wall, now accompanied by a new plaque that read, "Justice is not just about the law. It's about ensuring that everyone is treated fairly." Her phone buzzed with a message from a young law student. "Thank you for showing us that change is possible. You're an inspiration to all of us." Maya set the phone down and looked out her window at the vibrant lights of Phoenix glowing in the night. She knew what she had accomplished wasn't just a personal journey, it was part of a broader movement. She had planted the seeds of change, and future generations would carry the torch to keep the flame of justice burning brightly.